Hi, this is Laura Womack from Never Too Late Cafe, sponsor of Bloom Where You're Planted podcast. And welcome to part 2 of our conversation with Lee Pennington.
So that was the beginning of you doing other documentaries, different places around the world.
Oh, yeah, I've done documentaries all over. Jill, my lady now, Jill Baker, and I just got back to the South Pacific, and I did 2 or 3 documentaries on the South Pacific. Fascinated with the islands and the people and the cultures in the South Pacific, and I did a documentary on the great anthropologist Yoshihiko Sonoda, who reconstructed all the maraes, the outdoor temples in Polynesia. I mean, just hundreds of them, and including the great international marae at Raiatea, the marae called Tapu Tapu Atea. And anyway, I went to Huahine to film the marae, and synchronicity plays a great role in my life. Things just happen because they're supposed to happen. And while I was on Huahine, the man who constructed all these maraes showed up, Yoshihiko Sonoda, and I spent 4 days with him interviewing around these maraes, and it was the only documentary ever made on him, and he was the major anthropologist in Polynesia during the 20th century. Just died in 2017 at 94 years old. Anyway, when Jill and I went back, we found some young archaeologists, and wonderful Sonoda was their hero. And so here's this, I was there 1990, so 31 years ago, and now they're young people that are connected to the person I did a documentary on. It was just fascinating to me.
So tell me about some other places that you've done some documentaries. One that maybe stands out. I know that one does because, you had the 31-year connection there.
Yeah, well, they all stand out to me, but the thing that our motto was saving those things being lost. And we would go in places where we felt that what we were filming was about to disappear, and if we could get it on record on film, then it would have historical value in the future. And I did a documentary on Easter Island, and it was amazing experience. If you remember back when everybody was worried about the collapse of the world at Y2K, because they thought the dates of the computer was just going to blow up, and everything run by computer was going to collapse. Joy and I went to Easter Island because we felt, well, if the world's going to collapse, that'd be a nice place to be. We'd been there in 1997 while I was doing some films on South America, and of course, Thor Heyerdahl thought there was that connection between South America and Easter Island, and I was following through that with the what it was. In South America, there is a god called Kontiki, and in the South Pacific, there's a god called Tiki, and the god in South America supposedly sailed away toward the setting sun, and the god in Polynesia supposedly sailed from the rising sun. So here you have Kontiki leaving South America, and you have Tiki winding up in South Pacific. And so I was following that information, trying to trying to make some sense out of it. And that was the reason I went to Easter Island. But I went there in 97, and we went back at the millennium change, 99, 2000, and we're there about 3 weeks filming. I knew I needed to go back in 97. When I go to a place to film and am with the structures and the indigenous people, then I know what I need to think about, and I know what I need to feel and ask and question. And so I knew I needed to go back to Easter Island to be around the moai, the giant statues, to be alone with them and listen to what they were saying. And so I went back in 99, 2000 and completed the film, which came out in 2001. And just learned an enormous amount. That little island, the whole island is an archaeological site. It's only 3 miles wide at its widest point, and it's 12 miles long. So that's the whole island. And it's got 2 or 3 volcanic mountains on it. And it's got 1,000 of these statues. And they were all torn down literally after the first contact, with wars that went on because of what they call the long ears and the short ears. And that was because part of them used ear spools, and it stretched their ears real long. And they put the spools in those long stretches, and they were called the long ears, and the people who didn't do that were called the short ears. but anyway, there were wars, and these statues were all turned over, and many of them broken, and many of them left still at the quarry on the mountain Rano Raraku. They weren't even taken away. They were just carved, and some of them are still hooked to the mountain. They weren't even cut loose from the mountain. And many of them, the ones you see with just the heads, they're standing there, and the erosion has covered them up to their necks, and so everybody thinks Easter Island is just heads, but we've known since Catherine Rutledge was there, and the first archaeologist to look at Easter Island, 19 and 19, we've known that these things have bodies on them, but of course, she dug one of them out. But just recently, somebody dug one out and made a big to-do that they had discovered that they had bodies on them. Well, we've known that for well over 100 years. but
it was news anyway, to them.
Yeah. Anyway, we went back in 99 and 2000 and got to intimately spend time with the structures and be on the mountain. And in 99, when we flew in, now big jets, jumbo jets can fly into Easter Island. And the reason being is when the United States had the space program, they needed alternate landing sites for the shuttle in the South Pacific. And so they paid to have a runway on Easter Island that would handle the space shuttle if it needed to land an emergency landing there. The other one was Papeete in Tahiti. They worked on extending that runway there, and so they had 2 sites that they could do that. So now on Easter Island, if you can land a space shuttle there, you can land any jet that we got anywhere in the world. You could have landed the Concorde there, but it just while it was still around, I don't think they ever did. But anyway. Now, it used to take 2 weeks by boat to get to Easter Island. It's 1,500 miles from the shore of Chile. But now you can get there 5 hours one way and 6 hours the other way because of tailwinds difference. So we went in on a big jet, and also CNN, the crews of CNN went all over the world and set up spots. When the millennium changed, they started at the international date line and then moved along the date line as each hour came in a new time. A new Year's coming in a different time. And Easter Island was one of the sites that they went in, and they had a lot more pull than I had on the big jumbo jet that we were on. I always wanted to hire a plane if I could find one to fly around and circle Easter Island so I could circle it from there. Well, the CNN people talked the pilot of the big jumbo to circle Easter Island, and they were over at the window with their giant cameras, and I was over there with my little tiny camera filming out the window the same time they did. So I do have footage now of circling Easter Island, done with a multi-million-dollar jet, and thanks to a 20-person crew of CNN that flew over with us, and when we went in there. But Easter Island was one of the magic places I was. Another film I did very early that I'm still quite happy with is a piece I did on the country of Wales, Wales. I called it Wales History and Bondage. And the country has literally had its history covered up. And I went there and went to various sites and saw things, and it's just unimaginably how much cover up has been done of the Welsh history. They were an incredible culture, and we think of them as backward people with working in coal mines, et cetera. But they were an amazing culture. During the 6th century, they were the only indigenous culture with a written language in all of Europe, besides the Romans. Everything was in Latin, except in Wales, they had their own written language. And those things they wrote down, many of them have survived. But when the English powers that be took over, they tried to destroy all those records. But oddly enough, and it doesn't make any sense unless you know the background, in order to be the King of England now, you must first be Prince of Wales. Anyway, I did a piece called Wales History and Bondage, and that one, I was most happy with. I did a piece on the archaeology of South America, places like Machu Picchu, but the most amazing place in South America is not in Peru, but it's in Brazil. Not Brazil, but it's at Tiwanaku, inland, but it's a place that an archaeologist by the name of Arthur Poznansky spent 50 years working on the site. He felt the site was 17,000 years old. So it predates anything, but it's an incredible site that has stonework that for all purposes look like they have been laser cut. They're that precise. And that to me is the most important archaeological site in all South America. But anyway, I did a piece called Secret of the Stones. But as with a lot of stuff, the things I did 20 years ago or more still hold up because the questions asked have still not been solved. And so they need to, things work out strangely that way. I mean, it's amazing. The piece I did on Papua New Guinea, when I was there, they were using bows in the highlands, using bows and arrows, flint pieces for the spears and the arrowheads, like the Native Americans on this continent. And now guns have gotten into the highlands. So, that's just an explosive change. Much of what I filmed is, no longer exists.
I was going to ask you if anything, since one of your missions was to film something that if you didn't, it might not exist any longer. So that's parts of what you did there.
Everywhere I went, there was something that I filmed that's no longer there. Structures have been destroyed. I did a piece called Petroglyphs of Polynesia. Many of those petroglyphs have been destroyed. I've done hours of footage of petroglyphs, which I have in my study here. Raw footage of things that no longer exist at all. The only record of them are pictures and film that I took of them. A petroglyph it's writing on stone, and the archaeologists, since they can't really read the writing, they've changed the name of it to rock art.
Because some might be pictures,
Well, yeah, pictures and lines and the Native American, they call it rock writing, and that's what it is. But if you can't read it and you're a little upset at you can't read it, if you call it art, then anybody can have any opinion they want on art.
It's subject to someone's interpretation, right?
Yeah, that's my theory of why they call it rock art. But anyway, petroglyphs. The only thing that has survived incredible amounts of time has been on stone. If you had something written on paper 10,000 years ago, it doesn't exist now. And many of these stones, I'll give you just one example. Out in New Mexico, there's a stone out there called different names. One of the things the archaeologists call it is the mystery stone. But what it amounts to is a stone that in an ancient language has the 10 Commandments written on it. And when I first saw this stone, the whole thing was there. Since I first saw the stone, the first line has been somebody just banged it to pieces with another rock or a hammer or something. So it's been totally vandalized so that you can't read it. But there is a picture existing of the original. So this is the kind of thing that sometimes the picture is all you got left. And for some reason, I'll just call them wild cowboys for nothing else, use these incredibly rare petroglyphs for target practice. And one of the ways that Joy and I had of finding these rare petroglyphs was to go out in a canyon and start looking for bullet holes in the canyon side, up on the mountain. And if we saw a bunch of bullet holes, we know nearby there'd be petroglyphs because somebody was trying to shoot them with high-powered rifles or pistols or whatever. And probably I don't know, 50% of all petroglyphs have been destroyed. My feeling is that these have information that someday we're going to need desperately, but we won't have them.
Right, because someone's chosen to deface them or destroy them.
Right. Right.
So, can you tell us how you decided you had the urge, your calling to do some filming of these documentaries of these different sites? How did it all come about?
Well, I think that I've always been interested in my surroundings and what was out there. When I was just a kid, I'd collect fossils. I didn't know what fossils were. I thought they were Indian stuff. And I had a big fossil with a fern on it, and I thought the Indians had carved it. and I got interested. And in the seventh grade, I had a wonderful teacher out of Portsmouth, Ohio, named Bob Waddell. Still friends with Bob's daughter, Karen, who, by the way, well, I think she's moved back to Lexington. She lived in Portsmouth the last few years. She graduated from UK. I held her as a baby in Portsmouth, right when she was, shortly after she was born. The next time I saw her, one of my plays was being produced at the University of Kentucky, and Karen was working on the play. She was one of the members of the crew that was working on the play.
Oh, wow.
And everybody said, Karen Waddell's here, the daughter of Bob Waddell. Well, Bob Waddell was maybe the most important teacher I ever had, and in the seventh grade. And my sister, Laura, which you probably know that name fairly well.
Yes.
My sister, Laura Boots, we called her, taught me when I was in the sixth grade. And she said to me, someday you're going to go to college. And I remember breaking out laughing. I thought that was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. I knew what I was going to do. I was going to be a sheep farmer, and I was going to buy what was then called the Mayberry place and raise sheep. And it came up for sale. There were 50 acres. It came up for sale for $1 an acre, $50 for 50 acres. And I saved my money to buy it. I managed to save $35, but I never could get the whole $50. So my dream of being a sheep farmer, just fell by the wayside, and because I couldn't get that other $15. But anyway, Bob Waddell came along later after I laughed at my sister. And after that seventh grade, I didn't know how, but I knew I would go to college. He was such an amazing inspiration to me. My asking questions, he wouldn't tell me the answers, but he would show me how to find them. And that's always been important to me, to know where to look for something. It's not what you know or what you can talk about, but if you have a question and you can find the answer, then you're home free. But I knew I would go to college after Bob Waddell, and then I had two great teachers in high school with Lena Nevison in English, and also in chemistry I had a great teacher. And Jesse Stewart, the principal, was an incredible influence also. Jesse was the one that got me in Berea finally. I won a scholarship at McHale in journalism at Baldwin Wallace up in Ohio. And they told me with my workship and scholarship that it would pay all my expenses. And after the first semester, they sent me a bill for $500 I still owed. And back in those days, $500 might as well have been $1 million. But I had the letters that actually said all of my expenses would be paid. And I showed it to them, and they said, you're going to have to increase your workship. I was working 39 hours a week washing dishes and trying to take a full college load. And I said, well, if I have to increase the workship, 40 hours is a full-time job. and one more hour and I'll be a full-time dishwasher. Anyway, I went to Jesse, and he got me in Berea College, and I was able to work summers and various kind of jobs. One summer I sold encyclopedias, but make enough money at Berea. One semester of room and board and tuition. You got your free tuition at Berea. Was $262. So,
oh my gosh.
yeah. Now we're talking $50,000.
I know.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah, things have just kind of changed. But Jesse, when I came from Baldwin Wallace, and I said, Jesse, I can't go there anymore. They're asking me to work more than 39 hours a week and go to college. And Jesse said, do you want to go to Berea? And I said, yes, I'd love to go to Berea. And he picked up the phone and called the president and said, Francis Hutchins said, Francis, I got this boy here in Greenup County. He needs to be in Berea. And Dr. Hutchins said, send him down, let me talk to him. So my brother-in-law took me down, and I got in Berea at mid-semester. I think one of 18 students that year.
Oh my gosh, what an incredible story. So you mentioned a play. So you have, how many of your stories have been into plays?
Well, I've done 9 plays that have been produced. Some of them, some of the early ones, I think, and several of them have been produced into books, as plays, but books. So the first play I did was Louise Scribner, wonderful speech teacher at Berea College, and I got to know her well. And she sent me a letter after I'd graduated and said, I want you to write me a play for voices, like she said, similar to Dylan Thomas's Under the Milkwood. And Dylan Thomas was one who captured a little area of Wales in that wonderful play Under the Milkwood. And she said, I want you to capture Appalachia for me in a play. And of course, my being the kind of person I am, I said, sure. And thought, hey, I can do this. I can do this before the deadline. She had a deadline coming up sometime in September, and this was in like February or something. And anyway, I worked and worked and worked on this play, Appalachia, and it would just never come together. I thought I knew what Appalachia was, and then when I started working on the play, I realized I don't have the faintest idea what it is, and I've got to figure out what exactly is it. And September came and I didn't have it. October came and I didn't have it. November came and I didn't have it. And finally, one day it came to me what Appalachia was. And I wrote this sentence. I said, Appalachia is not what it is, it's what it was, and it never was. And once I did that, the play finished itself in probably 3 days. And I sent it to her, but it was too late for her to do that year at Berea because she'd already scheduled other stuff. But that was my first play, and it was called Appalachia, My Sorrow, a play for voices. And later I did a play called for voices called Coal Mine. And I think we all have a mental coal mine that we go down into the darkness at some time in our lives. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there's slate fall and we never get out. But anyway, that was my second play. The first play I finished at Berea and produced it at Berea. It was done at the old theater there in Berea, and Mom and my sister-in-law Edna drove Mom down to see it. And Mom got to see the play, which was exciting for me. I called that. That was my first one. I called that one The Porch, and I did it as an independent study at Berea. I took every writing class I could think of at Berea, every one they offered. I took every single writing class they offered at Berea College. In my senior year, I created an independent study in writing so I could take another writing class. and I was supposed to write one play, one short story, and one poem in the independent study. And I wrote one play called The Porch, and I wrote 57 poems, and I wrote 13 short stories. And during that semester, well, one of the play, which was the first play ever produced of mine, which I directed myself at the old the Tabernacle, which was the theater at Berea, the college theater. And Mom got to come see it. I was so proud. I based the image of the porch on the neighbor's porch where I grew up, Aunt Lonnie and Jim Moore. And Aunt Lonnie was nobody's aunt. She was just an old Cherokee woman who was married to Jim. Jim took another woman in, and strange kind of things there. But anyway, I based it on that porch, and Mom recognized the porch. She said, "That looks like Aunt Lonnie's porch," and it was. But anyway, Coal Mine was actually my third play, and The Porch was done a number of places after Berea. It's been produced probably 25 times or so. Appalachian My Sorrow has been produced a number of times. It was first produced in New York. And one of those things I didn't mean, I sent it to a friend, and she had a small theater, and she produced it before I even know it was happening. She sent me the bill, the thing on it saying,
Oh, the playbill from yeah.
Yeah. And so then I did Coal Mine, and that was premiered at Jefferson Community College. The late Jackie Clark produced that, did a wonderful job with it. And then I did several plays after that. But the first major kinds of plays I did was at the University of Kentucky. Bob Wills directed 5 of my plays premiered at the University of Kentucky. And the last one produced there was called The Scotian Women, and it was based on the Scotian mining disaster back in the late 70s. And at Scotia, there was an explosion and a slate fall, and a dozen or so, I think 11 men were trapped in there, and rescue workers tried to go in. A dozen of them tried to go in to recover them, and another explosion, and the rescue workers were also trapped in there, and so
Wow.
They finally wound up sealing the mine because of the methane gas and the danger of it continuing to explode. And I don't know if they ever got those bodies out. But anyway, I wrote a play about the women waiting for word on the disaster. based it loosely on the play The Trojan Women, at least set it up in a Greek kind of play. That was recently done, 2017, 18, or 19, somewhere along through there at Bellarmine University. And that was the most amazing production that I can imagine. There was no professional group in the world that could have done the kind of production that was done at Bellarmine University.
Well, I know you're also a musician, and you have a library at the University of Louisville named after you, and Joy.
Right.
What was the name of that?
They call it the Lee and Joy Pennington Cultural Heritage Gallery. It's an amazing collection. All of my writings and films and several of the artifacts I've collected around the world will wind up in that part of the library. But the amazing thing is that area is the home of U of L's most valuable rare library collection. They have first edition of Sir Isaac Newton. They have first edition of Copernicus, first edition of Galileo, signed.
Wow.
and this old boy from Greenham County sitting in there beside, are you kidding me? I'm not that far away from Isaac Newton.
You have an amazing life story, Lee, and I'm so glad that we connected a few years ago. I had lived out of state for many years, and then I came back and we reconnected. And so, well, as our time is kind of coming to a close, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on Bloom Where You're Planted. Oh, tell me briefly, what does that quote mean to you? Bloom where you're planted.
Well, it means no matter where you are, you can accomplish whatever you want to accomplish if you set your heart and your mind to it. I've always said that with oneself, if you're looking for the action over there, you're never going to find it. You just need, when you're looking for the action, you need to look right in front of you, because that's where it always is. It's just a matter of recognizing the environment around you as the most important environment for you as an artist. When I was in Harlan County working with students there, so many of them wanted to write about every place except Harlan County. But the thing they knew best was Harlan County.
Right.
And you know, when I was there in 2 semesters, those students published over 3,000 pieces of writing in over 300 magazines around the world. And
wow,
that's
amazing.
when they started focusing on what they knew and where they were. They had been planted in Harlan County, and that's where they were doing their art from.
Well, I know that more than likely we'll have a part 2 of this sometime, because there is more to you than we've been able to touch on today.
Well,
but our time is coming to a close. And again, I thank you. This is Laura Womack signing off from Never Too Late Cafe, the sponsor of Bloom Where You're Planted podcast. And again, thank you so much, Lee. It's been a joy to have you as a guest today.
It's a pleasure, Laura. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.